Greetings, this is Christine Van Pelt on Gibson County, Indiana, State Coordinator, Lead Recording Secretary for the Indiana Assembly, continuing with Brent Allen Winters, Declaration of 76, United States Constitution, a common lawyer comments, clause by clause, and the link is at the top. And we'll go ahead then and go to the reading for today so we can see. Yeah. All right. So we'll go ahead. All right. Amendment 2. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Congress, all stats at large, Volume 1 at 97, omits the first and third commas. The meaning remains unchanged. Comment. God bestows the right of self-defense in order for the individual to defend the jurisdiction, duty to use discretion to act, respecting a certain manner. God has delegated to him. This duty of self-defense necessarily includes the duty to meet force with like force. Hence, the duty of self-defense demands firearms. Amendment 2 puts it clear. The security of freedom is possible only where the right to keep and bear arms is not infringed. Hence, unlike Amendment 4, the reasonableness of the law in question is not the standard. And remember, every right in the Bill of Rights is fundamental and therefore individual. In turn, there is no other kind. Being fundamental, one needs no permission to use the right. Also, such a right cannot be taken except by due process, our constitutions and Magna Carta's law of the land. But above all, Amendment 2 bars infringement not only to protect the individual right to keep and carry a gun for personal protection, but also for a larger purpose, because it is the only way to have security without forfeiting freedom. The right, duty to act respecting a given manner, Amendment 2 bespeaks, is the foundation of our Constitution's 4 militia clauses design. Hence, its enforcement is a question arising under our Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, Clause 1. Further, it is the only one of the Bill of Rights' 10 amendments that the state and federal courts have a jurisdiction-driven duty to enforce against state infringement of it without need for incorporation through Amendment 4. Our American courts, however, have largely ignored this affirmative duty. Without a hint of objection, Congress added Amendment 2 a few years after the states ratified our Constitution to stop any from undermining the foundation of the Constitution's 3 militia clauses. The personal right to keep and carry a gun, and thereby overthrow their single purpose, to emplace the only possible way to have both national security and individual freedom. In short, Amendment 2 bars any from bringing to naught the only thing that will bring safety without sacrificing freedom, the militia of the several states, Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1. Amendment 2 protects the foundation of the militia of the several states, the only means to have security and freedom. Simply put, the Constitution's foundation for freedom is the state's militias. The only true undergirding of these militias is each one's personal right to arms, no right to keep and carry a gun. No state militias, no security, no freedom. Regardless of promises, bureaucrats will never achieve security for any except for themselves. In fact, the Department of Homeland Security, so-called, and its police state forerunners, IRS, FBI, CIA, NSA, and etc., are the very kinds of creatures our militia clauses target as dangers to freedom. It bears repeating, our freedom will never last without security. but security by any means other than the militia of the several states acting in accord with our militia clauses, i.e., in the common law tradition, shall always demand loss of freedoms. To sum up, civil laws bureaucracies promise police state security in exchange for freedom, resulting in neither. But by contrast, common law bestows freedom as each state recognizes the constitutional necessity of every able-bodied man to discipline himself to regular keeping, safe carrying, and skilled use of his firearm, ready to answer every constitutional call to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15. The civil law says, give us your freedoms and relax. Our professional police state bureaucrats will protect you. The common law says, protect yourselves and you shall keep your freedoms too. Bottom line, security and freedom at the same time are possible only as the militia of each state fulfills its affirmative non-delegable duty according to our Constitution's 4 militia clauses. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 and 16. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, Amendment 2. Up until 9/11, Americans enjoyed more security and freedom because the militia, meaning at common law the people of each state, as a whole have kept armed, even though the state legislatures and Congress have since the early 19th century neglected our militia's clauses' commands to enact guidance. This apathy for Amendment 2's purpose moved Supreme Court Justice Story to warn us indifference may lead to contempt and thus gradually undermine all the protection intended by this clause of our National Bill of Rights. Indifference toward our militia clauses is now seen. The police state moves upon us apace. Indeed, nothing will ruin the country, says Daniel Webster, if the people themselves undertake its safety, and nothing can save it if they leave that safety in any hands but their own. The words well-regulated militia denote those able-bodied men of the people, who each keeps a loaded firearm in his home and carries it outside his home. The words free state refer to each of the separate United States, confirming each state's concurrent jurisdiction over its militia with the national governments. See U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 16. In colonial days, regulate signified that which was kept regular, i.e., always in readiness, good to go. Accordingly, in using the word regulated, respecting the militia, Amendment 2 denotes those of the people always armed, ever ready to muster when called to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15. Indeed, regularity still means to remain in steady operation day in and day out. For example, our Navy distinguishes between the regular Navy and the non-regular Navy, or reserves. The regular Navy, always on active duty, is always armed, on patrol, and ready to fight. The reserves are not. In short, the militia, i.e. the people, is well regulated when each member keeps himself in readiness, each man keeping and bearing his own firearm and disciplining himself to its safe, effective use. Militia is Latin for the old common law word feared, signifying the able-bodied male population, every man able to carry his weapon. Further, common law required each militiaman to stay at all times regular, self-armed and self-disciplined to safe and skilled use of his weapon, keeping it always within reach, whether at home or away, enabling quick muster and readiness to fight. Hence, the colonial militia at Concord were called Minutemen. A strong body makes the mind strong. As to the species of exercises, I advise the gun. While this gives moderate exercise to the body, it gives boldness, enterprise, and independence to the mind. Games played with the ball are too violent for the body and stamp no character on the mind. Let your gun, therefore, be your constant companion of your walks, Thomas Jefferson. Our founders wanted us to be smartly armed, ready to stop the oppressor. Richard Lee. A militia is all men capable of bearing arms to preserve liberty. It is essential that the whole body of the people always possess arms. George Mason. The militia is the whole people. To disarm the people is the best and most effectual way to enslave them. Sam Adams. The Constitution shall never be construed to prevent the people of the United States from keeping their own arms. Noah Webster. The supreme power in America cannot enforce unjust laws by the sword, because the whole body of the people are armed and constitute a force superior to any band of regular troops. James Madison. We enjoy the advantage of being armed which Americans possess over the people of almost every other nation. Thomas Jefferson. No free man shall ever be debarred the use of arms. The common law tradition's regular, well-regulated militia reaches back to the days before King Alfred lived, A.D. 849 to 899, requiring every able-bodied man to carry his own weapon. Even while farming, Anglo-Saxon work crews stayed always armed and ready to engage brigands. William I, reigned 1066 to 1087, required each shop owner and landowner in England to keep a long bow and at least 40 arrows. The British Bill of Rights, Article 7 of 1688, states, subjects may have arms for their defense. Accordingly, Granville Sharp concludes, the common laws of England always required the people to be armed, and not only armed, but to be expert in arms. Amendment 2 accords the only part of our Constitution obligating individuals to a duty: stay self-armed, self-disciplined, to safety and skill in arms, and regular in readiness to muster upon call. The significance of the colonial militia, says the Supreme Court, was that it was composed of civilians primarily, soldiers on occasion. It was upon such men that the states relied for defense and securing of the laws. The security of your free state, says Amendment 2, depends upon such self-armed, able-bodied men of the people called the state's militia. Moreover, any infringement, background checks, permits, regulations that may prevent, impede, hamper, or even chill this personal right to keep and bear arms, invites thugs, whether from government or elsewhere. This right is so important to the security of our free country that its bar against infringement is not only against government, but also against any other person or power attempting to infringe. The colonial militia, said the Supreme Court in Miller, comprised all males physically capable of acting in concert for the common defense, who, when called for service, were expected to appear bearing arms supplied by themselves and of the kind in common use at the time. Indeed, for a man to be ready to fight at the moment's notice, he must keep his firearm and ammunition handy in his home. When he leaves his home, he must carry that gun loaded. Second Amendment's well-regulated militia are those men of the people carrying loaded weapons. Indeed, Amendment 2 is not to protect hunting, but every individual's personal right to keep and carry guns to protect himself, his family, his neighbors, and his country. Amendment 2 also protects his right against state and local infringement. See McDonald v. Chicago, 561 U.S. 3025, 2010. The militia is always armed and ready under state and local command to meet the threat that comes fast, without warning. Indeed, to keep one's firearm in one's home and to carry it loaded, having become familiar with it through regular use, is to strengthen our country's security. Such persons, says Amendment 2, are necessary to our freedom. Our Constitution's domestic tranquility requires an armed people. I would never invade the United States, said Yamamoto during World War II. There would be a gun behind every blade of grass. But further, says Cooper, and armed people are better mannered. To sum up, most people are law abiding and uninclined to gun crimes. Only a small minority is so inclined, because only the law abiding will observe firearm laws. Government infringement upon the right to keep and carry firearms limits only the law abiding, but not the criminal class. Consequently, the result of infringement on the right to keep and bear arms is not only foreseeable, but is also now seen. Government employees' deep respect for fundamental law and rights produce disrespect for government. If, on the other hand, government abides by this law of nature, the right to self-protection, never limiting one's keeping and carrying of guns, the law abiding and armed will outnumber the lawless, the coward class out for the easy mark, unwilling to risk plundering, robbing, or raping any of the armed and law abiding. By contrast, the law abiding are a bold class, standing on the high ground of right with the pluck to defend themselves, their families, neighbors, and country. But, says the naive, government will keep guns only from dangerous men. Such silly talk demands that we trust those in government, the very persons that Amendment 2, without question, relegates to that bunch the Constitution distrusts. In fact, to allow government to choose who may and who may not have a firearm is to let political hacks and bureaucrats disarm their critics and crush them. To this history attests. Thus, says Justice Story, Amendment 2 is the palladium, symbol and surety of our freedom. See this handbook, U.S. Declaration of 76, sections 8, clause 25 to 29 in comments. Or all sections 8, 25 to 29. See further, Brent Allen, Winters Militia of the Several States, 2012. Amendment 3. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Comment. The Amendment 3 is another expression of our common law's castle doctrine. See this handbook, U.S. Constitution, Amendment 4, and comment. Only one court in 1982 has wrestled with Amendment 3. The case was curious, and the finding adds nothing to the first principle for which Amendment 3 stands. Our armed forces are for our benefit. We are not for the benefit of our armed forces. Accordingly, Amendment 3 bars government from forcing any person to be more of a benefit to the armed forces than the armed forces are to him. Quartering soldiers in the home benefits the soldier more than the homeowner by bringing government's eyes and ears into the home and displacing common law with martial civil law. To be sure, our starving continental soldiers often sheltered in the homes of colonials. The colonists, though at times impatient, nevertheless fed and sheltered the rustic lads, knowing that these soldiers benefited them more than they were benefiting the soldiers. In short, as long as these boys were willing to dodge British musket balls, colonial farmers were hospitable. See this handbook, U.S. Declaration of 76, section 16, and comment. True freedom includes one's right to choose whether to exercise or to waive one's right, as here with the colonials' choice to shelter continental soldiers. So also are the common law rights to speak or stay silent, to vote or not vote. When men are forced to use their rights, such are no longer rights. For example, in communist Russia, now also in Australia, it was a crime not to vote, so that the Communist Party could boast that voter turnout was always over 90%. Forced use of a right removes personal decision and therefore is not freedom. All right. That is the last for this call. And we will see you on the next call. Peace and love.